This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
What's up, jerks?
Manning retired.
Which one?
Both.
I like kickers.
Put him on the board. Hausch Mazzoli. Got it. Championship.
Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Nerds. Preseason football is over and draft period is upon us. I am Jason Jarvie. Follow me on Twitter at Jarvie the King. We're going to break down fantasy football, and with me this week again, my brother, Joel Jarvie. How's it going?
It's going good, Jason. How many teams have you drafted so far as of today?
I have drafted one, but it was not my own team.
Interesting.
So my brother-in-law reached out to me about 4 days in advance. He asking me if I could draft his team for him. He had some stuff going on Wednesday, and that he wouldn't be available for the draft at 7:30.
So how do the other people in your brother-in-law's league feel about him bringing in a ringer?
I don't think they knew. I think they probably wouldn't have had too much of an issue, but it's either me or have a auto pick draft it. So
You're clearly better than auto pick.
I'd like to think so, because the auto pick would just draft, they would draft the kicker in the 8th round.
Yeah, you know what's great about auto pick that I love is and I'm not sure if this is true for all leagues, but I know Yahoo will start drafting by what your team need is. So if you're all full up on, if you have starters at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, no matter who the next pick is and who the value pick should be, they're going tight end. And after that, they're going kicker, and after that, they're going defense.
That sucks, and it's like that in mock drafts too, like a simulated mock draft, where if you want to try to get an accurate view of where somebody's going to get drafted, the mock drafts, all the auto drafts, that does the same thing. It fills up your roster.
How many mock drafts and auto drafts have you done this offseason?
I've probably done at least a dozen, just to kind of get an idea of where people are going to go.
Do you get anything? What do you get out of them? I mean, I feel like, I guess, mock drafts and auto drafts for me, when it comes to the main league, when it comes to because everyone's got your favorite league, you can't pick a favorite child, but you always have your favorite league, the league you care the most about. I don't feel like you can't simulate that draft. No matter how many times you do it, you just can't, because every time that Joe is going to take 4 quarterbacks, even though we don't need 4 quarterbacks, he's going to do it. You can't mock that.
Right, but I think what you can get out of it, though, is just a better idea of where players should be going. I mean, you're going to draft how you want to draft yourself, but you can at least have an idea of when a quarterback should really be taken. Because, obviously there's a ton of running backs and wide receivers that you'd be better served taking before taking, the 5th best quarterback on the board.
Sure. So I have drafted one team as well prior to, obviously our draft is tomorrow, but I've drafted one other team for myself. Unfortunately, it was an 8-team league, and 8-team league to me is basically just all-stars against all-stars. There's not a whole lot of studying you need to do. There's going to be guys throughout the entire draft able for you to pick, and it's crazy that you subtract 2 teams from the league and there's that much more talent.
You could auto draft a 8-team league, and everybody would be fine. You could just set auto draft for everybody and see what happens, and then you'd be able to fix yourself on the waiver wire easily.
How fun is that?
It's not a whole lot of fun. I get some people may want to do that. Maybe you don't have enough members to be in your league. But yeah, so I drafted for my brother-in-law, and I think that I probably did slightly better than he did. I guess he said that whenever he's drafted, it's Yahoo, and it actually shows you the rank of where your team is, and he almost always finishes dead last. So I think I improved. I picked 5th in a 12-team league, and I was projected as the 2nd highest team.
Oh.
So I think the
little
league,
humble brag there.
It is a little humble brag, but the league is kind of set up strange, and I think I may have figured out how to draft their league pretty easily. They start a quarterback, 1 running back, 2 wide receivers, a pure wide receiver running back flex, and then a wide receiver running back tight end flex, and then kicker defense. And people were taking a ton of running backs. There were teams in that league who actually only had 3 wide receivers on their team, which I think that's a mistake.
That's crazy.
Because running backs are there's so much more variance in the running backs, where wide receivers any week they could go off.
That's crazy though. But so they're taking running backs, but you said their flex positions are all wide receiver. I mean, that's crazy. You'd think that wide receivers would be flying off the board in that league.
And that's what I did. I think I ended up with about 6 wide receivers and 5 wide receivers and 4 running backs.
Nice.
I wanted to give them a healthy balance. With the running backs, I got them girly. And then I had to wait a little bit to get the next one. But I kind of stacked him up at wide receiver. I got him Drew Brees at quarterback.
Good pick.
I got him Jordy Nelson. That was one of his wide receivers.
Solid.
So, he is a little crazy when he drafts, though. He always, I think last year he went in trying to draft all Packers, which last year obviously would have hurt him.
Sure.
But I was able to kind of stay true to, he only had a couple of requests. He said Randall Cobb, and I saw Jordy Nelson on the board. I got him Jordy Nelson because I didn't want to take Randall Cobb. And then he said Tom Brady at some point, if you can get him for a deal. And he went way too high for me. So I feel like I got him good. But what are the ethics on that? Because I know last year I drafted for the Doc in his family league. And I know, and that was a live draft that I went to. I went to some dude's house and then we drafted in his garage. And there were definitely some grumbles because I show up and they're like, dude, what's this?
Well, I think it's been established that the Doc has no ethics when it comes to fantasy football. So
he just wants to win.
Well, this is the guy that will openly admit that he will veto any trade that he feels like doesn't benefit himself. So I'm not surprised to hear that his league was not happy that he pulled a ringer in for his draft.
I mean, the Doc essentially is, I don't know what, the Jerry Jones of fantasy football. He went out, he couldn't make it to the draft, and he goes, nah, I'll just get the guy who does my fantasy football show to draft it for me. And he even had somebody else draft him in another league this year. He will be drafting in his family league, which best of luck to him, but also best of luck to the jock, Adam Straczynski.
Oh, so you mean you're not drafting his family league either?
I'm not. I was thinking if it wasn't on Saturday, I was thinking about asking them, what Buffalo Wild Wings you guys are going to be at, and maybe I'll just show up, maybe give them some advice. I don't know. It's definitely weird drafting another guy's team.
For sure. Yeah.
And it's happened with the Slackjaws where people are out of town, people are at the circus, they're in Italy, and even though our draft is on the same day every year, and it's just kind of strange.
Yeah, I think there are two different things, right? So on the one hand, you're drafting for guys like your brother-in-law in a league that you don't play in, so you really don't have any other kind of rooting interests, and you can put on the brother-in-law hat for a day and do the draft. I think it's different when you're drafting in the same league where you're playing somebody. I think it takes a stronger person than I couldn't draft somebody's team in a league knowing that I'm drafting for myself too. I just couldn't do it because as much as I would like to say that I'm trying to draft the best possible team for both of us, I'm really only trying to draft the best possible team for me.
And I think if you are in this kind of situation where you are drafting for somebody in your league, the easiest way to do it would just be best player available, and to if really truly be like an auto pick, fill out his roster, and then don't worry about if there's a toss up between two players. Don't sweat it. Just draft whoever is the best player available, because then you have a clear conscience. You can say, hey, I drafted the best player who was there. It doesn't, I don't know. Let's say you're deciding between two rookie wide receivers in Sterling Shepard and Laquan Treadwell, and I think Shepard may have a higher value, even though you may like him as well. And then you can clearly see Laquan Treadwell is dealing with he has his quarterback out now for the year. So you just draft whoever's the best guy.
I agree. That could lead us right into news, right?
It does lead us right into news, and probably the biggest news. There's two quarterbacks who went down for really long periods of time, and we'll start out with the Vikings. Teddy Bridgewater in practice, non-contact injury, blew out his knee, and dislocated his knee, tore his entire ACL. And they're saying that there's no nerve damage, but they're saying it's going to be a very long recovery period, and he may not even be, back to where he was ever again.
Yeah, this is every NFL fan's nightmare. I mean, just a dumb, stupid injury. I mean, you can't even be mad at the preseason game. Like, it happened in practice. Like, it's horrible. And if you're a Vikings fan, granted, I'm not a huge Vikings fan, but I mean, if you like enjoy those guys that blow those horns, like that,
right?
That's horrible. I mean, Bridgewater's your season. He's your franchise, man.
I mean, Adrian Peterson is your franchise, but Teddy Bridgewater was coming along.
Yeah.
And you're coming off a year where you actually won the NFC North. You were a field goal away from advancing in the playoffs, and now this happens on the eve of the regular season. So I'm not sure if a whole lot changes in what they're going to plan to do, because the play calling was going to go, give the ball to Adrian Peterson and let him win the game for you. Let him win. Let your defense stop the other team.
Yeah, and when I said franchise earlier, obviously Adrian Peterson, he's the franchise. I get that, but the NFL is a quarterback-driven league. You've got to have successful quarterback play to do well in the NFL, period. Whether or not you have Adrian Peterson on your team. Teddy Bridgewater going down is just devastating.
So, I mean, I think you would agree that it doesn't really change Adrian Peterson's value, because Teddy Bridgewater wasn't the best passer. He was definitely getting better, but I don't think the backup Sean Hill is going to make that big of a difference, because it was always going to give him the ball 20 to 30 times a game, and then let the defense do the rest of it.
Yeah, AP's still AP.
But I think it does affect the wide receivers, is the biggest. You had Stephon Diggs, who kind of came on last year. They drafted Laquan Treadwell. I think there was hope that they'd kind of take a next step. And because AP is getting older, maybe you surround Bridgewater with some weapons, and he can become a better quarterback. Kind of the Matt Stafford idea. Sure.
Well, I mean, as Lions fans, we have a little bit of experience with Sean Hill, and we know that the guy is a consummate professional. I have no hard feelings toward him during his time in the Honolulu Blue and Silver. In fact, we were in Tennessee for one of the most amazing football games we've seen, and that was after Stafford had gone down with an injury. Sean Hill led our Lions back to a great game and to a tie and to overtime, and I can still picture all those Titans fans as they were streaming out of the stadium, and Titus Young caught that touchdown. That was a thing of beauty, my man.
It was. Titus Young, another guy name to bring up. Where's he? He's a crazy person.
Yeah, he's a crazy person indeed.
We lost that game, though.
Yeah, so Vikings fans, I think you guys are, you're lucky to have Sean Hill.
He's going to game manage, but I think what you lose is Teddy Bridgewater. He's going to win you at least one or two games just by himself. I don't see Sean Hill as a guy who's going to win you a game. So it'll definitely affect Stephon Diggs. It'll affect Treadwell. Kyle Rudolph probably wasn't going to be too involved, but if they are down in games, if he has to throw, Rudolph could become a safety net. But the biggest, what they're going to do, they're going to run the ball with Adrian Peterson. They're going to dump the ball off to Adrian Peterson, and then they're going to dump the ball off to Jerick McKinnon. And then if they're in third and long, Hill will try and get the ball to one of the receivers.
Yeah, but Jason, let's break down what's really important in Minnesota and fantasy. How does this affect Blair Walsh?
Blair Walsh, he's going to have to be kicking pretty long.
I'm just kidding. Nobody
goals.
Cares. Nobody cares about Blair Walsh.
Okay, fine. We'll move on to the other quarterback who got injured. Pretty much the day after the show came out, we talked about Tony Romo a little bit, and lo and behold, he got injured again. He had gone down, I think, the day before. So he said that he could come back. It's so strange. And it turns out he has a broken vertebrae. And, throughout the week, it had varied between experts saying that he's going to be out 6 to 10 weeks. Jason Garrett was the head coach of the Cowboys, was saying that he's not ruling him out for week 1. But I think now they're kind of on the same page that he's going to be out 6 to 10 weeks. And I'd probably look on the longer side of that the vertebrae isn't something that you can really, you can't cast a vertebrae. You can't put a cast on that. You can put a cast on a broken arm, on a broken leg. You can only just immobilize your back and hope that it heals properly. So with Romo's history, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't see the field at all this year.
Yeah, what's this guy's legacy going to be, man? Never mind NFL legacy. His fantasy legacy has got to be one of the worst in fantasy sports. Who's another guy that's been taken with more hope in drafts to just have just so many injuries and just stupidity when it comes to fantasy play? I don't understand how people take Tony Romo.
Yeah, and I really think that he should go undrafted. I think Dak Prescott, the guy who's going to back him up, is probably going to have more value and maybe draft him late in drafts, or if you're in a 2-quarterback league. But if you're in a single quarterback league, Tony Romo, I really wouldn't draft him.
I like Dak Prescott. I think he's got a lot of skills. I think he's got a lot of intangibles. This guy could be a huge fantasy play this season.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to draft him too high, though. And I'd still be pretty cautious drafting him in a 1-quarterback league. I would really want to make sure that I had one of those top quarterbacks, whether I get an Aaron Rodgers or a Cam Newton. And then I would just wait until the late rounds in the draft, and then I'll take Dak Prescott. Because I think it really could go either way. He's had a really good preseason. He has the stats. But it's also preseason. You're playing against vanilla defenses. Who knows what he's going to see come the regular season.
Are people drafting Dak, though, with Romo going down, will people draft Dak Prescott with a Tony Romo type expected output?
I don't think so. Well, maybe, because if you're expecting Tony Romo to be hurt at some point in the season, it could be a very similar. But I think Tony Romo, if he was healthy, I don't think the comparison would be similar. I think Tony Romo is probably a top 15 quarterback if he's healthy the entire year, where Dak Prescott, I think healthy, is probably viewed as probably towards the back end of the 30s.
Yeah, I know we don't talk a ton of keeper, we don't talk a ton of dynasty fantasy, but I got to imagine that Dak Prescott would be a big keeper dynasty play.
Yeah, and draft him late and just see what happens, because he has the talent around him with Dez Bryant, Zeke Elliott, that offensive line that they have. He's going to be able to do something. So who knows? I think we're just going to have to wait and see. But I would probably... So what are you saying? Would you draft him? We have our draft tomorrow. Are you going to draft Dak Prescott late?
I'll definitely keep... He will be a highlighted guy on my draft board. I will be watching him, and I will be seeing who's there, who I have. Obviously, it's so hard to talk about stuff like that because you never know how the draft is going to come to you. Yeah, he's definitely someone that I would take a flyer on, maybe even early.
Okay, I'll take a mental note of that. Draft strategy for me. Thanks a lot. Moving on to the Seattle Seahawks. Running back Thomas Rawls. They're saying he's going to be ready for week 1, but it's going to be, I think it's a giant question mark there in Seattle. Especially, and we've heard this in years past, that Christian Michael looks amazing and he's going to be this great running back. Even when Marshawn Lynch was there, we heard that. And we're hearing that again with Thomas Rawls, and Christian Michael just ends up not doing anything.
He wasn't even on the Seahawks last year.
Yeah, I think they traded him. I think he was on Dallas last year.
Yeah.
So Thomas Rawls, if you are drafting this weekend, I think you got to be a little cautious, because I'm not sure if he's going to be ready week 1, or if he is playing, I'm not sure if he's going to get all the carries, because they are talking up Christian Michael, and they're probably going to give him at least a quarter of the snaps that Rawls would get.
Rawls is a guy that, in like I said, when I drafted earlier in the week, he was a guy that I think got pushed down further than he needed to be because of all this, because of the injury, because of all the news on Christian Michael and stuff like that. And in the end, I mean, I felt like the value was better than where I was going to be able to get him. So I snapped him up. And right now he's in my starting lineup, but we'll see.
Well, you also have an all-star lineup to back him up with because it's an 8-team league, right?
This is true, yes.
Another player on the Seahawks who is going to be a question mark for week 1, Jimmy Graham. I think if he was 100% healthy, I think he's a top 5 tight end again. I think with where this offense is going in Seattle, they're going to a passing offense. But I think even though he's been back and he's working, they're going to work him back slowly because I think the team would rather have them for the playoff run than have them week 1 for fantasy players.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the Seahawks they're in it for the long haul. They're not worried about week 1. They're not worried about week 2. They're worried about first round of the playoffs. So I could see them definitely working him back slowly, which will drive all fantasy players insane.
So, I mean, if you are a person who's drafted Jimmy Graham, who's going to draft Jimmy Graham, how do you draft a backup tight end?
So that's tough, right? When I draft, I typically like to, the last few years I've made it a point to get Gronkowski because I know at that point I don't have to worry about backup tight ends or anything like that. And for some reason too, it seems like the Patriots always seem to have a late season bye the last couple of years. That would be I think I'm a big proponent of stocking up on talent, and there's such little fantasy value and talent in tight end that to me, I would rather get a guy that I could plug in and not have to worry about for a long time. So maybe take a look at those bye weeks. What tight ends have late bye weeks? You can just draft them and start them and not really worry about it unless he becomes a giant void and just an abyss on your team. But like, in that situation, I do that with kickers and defenses too. I like to look for kickers, defenses with late bye weeks so that I can early on in the season when there's still a lot of question marks, I can load my team with value and question marks and hope that those pan out as opposed to taking up roster positions on backups. Fantasy football at some point during the season becomes all about making your starting lineup the strongest, and depth doesn't matter, people. You need to make your starting lineup the strongest you possibly can. And I think that's one thing that I don't know that fantasy players understand. Like they fall in love with that depth. Those 2 quarterbacks that just, they're so good, and I love having these 2 quarterbacks. At some point, man, you can only start the one quarterback in your league. Get rid of the other one. Get value.
Yeah, so Jimmy Graham, if you are drafting, or if you're drafting really any of the injured tight ends, you're just gonna have to roll with it. And if you do draft a second tight end, I would probably wait until the later rounds because there's gonna be talent, and out of the blue, somebody's gonna show up.
Gary Barnidge, anybody?
Gary Barnidge, I picked him up last year off waivers, and he was part of the reason that I won my league at the radio station. And there's tons of rookies out there. There's Hunter Henry on San Diego, Jesse James I've been hearing a bit about on Pittsburgh. Ladarius Green can't seem to get healthy, and they're gonna have to throw the ball. They're gonna throw the ball in Pittsburgh. So there's gonna be a tight end out there, whether you draft them late or if you pick them up on the waiver wire.
I'm a big fan of the quarterback to tight end double dip. Because sometimes some of those great quarterbacks don't necessarily, like Aaron Rodgers. Does Aaron Rodgers really have like a marquee tight end that you're going to go after?
No, and he has 2 this year now.
Right. And so I kind of like to sometimes double up. That's one of those places that I think is fun to double up.
Moving on to a one quarterback tight end situation that I am interested in seeing, Drew Brees to Coby Fleener. In the beginning of when I started the show, I think Coby Fleener, I was really excited about him going to that offense. But through the preseason, there has been a little bit of doubt that there hasn't been as much connection between those two. And does this move your draft value for Fleener down at all? Because I think we saw this last year. I mean, who was the guy who we thought was going to replace Jimmy Graham? And then he was nothing, and Ben Watson came out of nowhere.
Yeah. So I think I would rather roll my dice on a New Orleans Saint tight end than almost probably any tight end in the league, because the tight end in that offense with Drew Brees at the helm is as good as a goal line back. They love the tight end, and Brees loves throwing to the tight end. So I guess I'd give Fleener a little bit of slack when it comes to that. I was really excited for Fleener when he came out of college and went to Indianapolis. I thought he'd be a natural fit with Luck coming from Stanford. I figured, they'd have the Stanford connection. They'd pick it right back up in the NFL, and that just never happened.
Right. Yeah, and I definitely it'll get good. I'm not sure if it's going to happen right away week 1. It might take a couple weeks for them to get on the same page and to really start utilizing him the way that they should be. They're probably going to rely pretty heavily on Brandon Cooks and Mark Ingram week 1.
They should.
Going to the Chiefs, Jamal Charles, he's off the PUP list. He's working out, but he's already dropped in draft boards. Should he be dropped? Should he be cautious drafting Jamal Charles?
I just read the other day that they still haven't named him as the starter. They're still saying Spencer Ware is the starter in Kansas City. I mean, really? Spencer, I don't care how long Jamal Charles has been on PUP list, IR, whatever. He's got to be better than Spencer Ware.
Yeah, I don't think the gap isn't as large as people think, though. I think even if Jamal Charles is healthy, Spencer Ware is going to eat into goal line carries.
Sure.
Because they're going to want to try and keep him healthy. And Spencer Ware he's a big boy. He's a goal line back. I think we could see kind of the same thing of what Mike Tolbert used to do in San Diego. He could be a complete touchdown vulture. It shouldn't hurt Jamal Charles' value too much. But I am going to be very cautious drafting him. If he rolls around to me in the second round, I think there's no reason that he should be a first round pick.
No.
And depending on where you're drafting, I might even let him slide to the third round.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, the Chiefs are playing for real. They don't care about fantasy. And so to see a report that he could be rested on, it's like, then they're playing for the long haul. They don't care about us. You got to take that into consideration.
If you are a Jamal Charles owner, are you jumping up a couple rounds earlier and drafting Spencer Ware as a handcuff?
Is Charkandrick West still there?
He's still there. But I think Spencer Ware is the clear number one. He's the number one handcuff.
Then yes.
I think West he has been dealing with some injuries. I think Ware would probably be the guy who would get them the bulk of the carries.
Then yeah, at that point, Charles was a guy that I definitely want. I definitely want a handcuff for him.
Going on to the Browns, their rookie wide receiver Corey Coleman got his first preseason catch in their game yesterday. A little disturbing. He was held without a catch in his debut last week, and he had 4 targets and 1 catch. That's not what I want to see out of the guy that I drafted in the first round to be the savior of the team, and especially with what else the other wide receivers that they have there in Cleveland.
Yeah, you don't often get a chance to say that you feel like the Browns have a lot of weapons, but don't you feel like there's quite a few weapons on that team?
They do. I mean, and not just with wide receivers. I think Duke Johnson is a really good pass-catching running back. They still have Isaiah Crowell. And then Josh Gordon, even though he's suspended for 4 weeks, if he can stay on the straight and narrow, he is a top 5 fantasy wide receiver.
He's got all the skills.
And then even there's a breakout wide receiver that's come literally out of nowhere in Terrell Pryor. And they've been talking. Experts have been talking him up, saying that he could have a decent season this year.
Nice.
So I'm not sure if Corey Coleman is going to be that big of a difference maker this year.
Yeah, again, he's that. I love first year wide receivers. They are so sexy and they are so full of potential, and you just want to be on board for these guys. And they almost always bite you in the ass.
And I mean, when Gordon gets back, I think what you're going to see is Gordon will be the starting wide receiver, and then Terrell Pryor will probably be the wide receiver opposite of Gordon. So that'll leave Corey Coleman as a slot receiver. And maybe that'll be good for him. That'll give him time to develop, and that's a role that can produce a lot of fantasy points.
Absolutely.
So it's gonna be wait and see. if you had to rank drafting the Browns wide receivers, how would you go?
I would probably go Corey Coleman, Josh Gordon, Terrell Pryor. That's where. So I feel like if you're taking those guys for your team anyway, you're probably drafting them late as it is.
And you're drafting them as depth.
Right. So at that point, maybe you do move Josh Gordon up to 1, because I mean, to get the skill set of a top 10 wide receiver as late as you could potentially be getting Josh Gordon, I mean, you gotta love that. You gotta love that value.
Yeah, and so if we're going on the context that we're drafting these guys all outside of the 12th round, I'd probably go Gordon, and then I'd go Terrell Pryor at number 2.
Shake it up.
And Corey Coleman at number 3. Because I don't believe in him yet. And I think he's going to be... Unfortunately, he's going to be drafted in most leagues just because of how high he was drafted in the draft this year. But I'm going to let him go. And he should go undrafted, but he won't. And then last bit of news we have the Arizona Cardinals, Larry Fitzgerald, dealing with a minor MCL sprain. Another wide receiver situation that is just... It's a mess. Or it's not a mess, but it's a big question mark. Yeah. With Larry Fitzgerald, he's 33 now, I think. And then you have Michael Floyd, who every year he's viewed as he's going to be the top wide receiver.
I have no idea why.
And then he does nothing. He's the new David Boston. And then you have John Brown, who he's so fast.
He's a speedster.
But he also has a ton of injury problems.
He's a track star.
I mean, that's another... Does Larry Fitzgerald... Is this the year? Is he finally done?
I mean, I'm sure I'm going to say yes, and he won't. But, I mean, I give Larry Fitzgerald a lot of credit last year for taking that role in the slot. And he was on fire those last 6 weeks or so of the fantasy season and the regular season. And he was a huge difference for the Cardinals. And that's something that I don't know that I've seen. Like, I would have loved for Calvin Johnson in his last year to maybe take a role like Larry Fitzgerald, because they're just not the same receivers as they are. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't diminish their legacy or anything. So for Fitzgerald to do that and have success, that was great last year. I was happy for him. I feel like, I don't know if there's any more moving around for him. I feel like Father Time's probably going to catch up with you.
Yeah, and I think you're going to start to see that this season. And, last year you had the resurgence, but I think that was more Carson Palmer being healthy the entire year than Larry Fitzgerald finding the fountain of youth. I think they have too many guys there that, with Michael Floyd, who knows, maybe. John Brown is definitely a good wide receiver. And then they have J.J. Nelson, who they really, really like. And Bruce Arians has even said that they want to get him involved in the offense. So he's going to eat up some stuff. And if David Johnson can actually become the running back that everybody is saying that he's going to be, there's only so many balls that can go around. So even if he is completely healthy, Larry Fitzgerald may see a downswing in his production this year. I
can't... For some reason, the Cardinals, to me, just seem like smoke and mirrors. I don't... And I have nothing to back that up, and I'm sorry, Arizona Cardinal fan, to say that, but they just seem like smoke and mirrors to me. I can't buy into David Johnson. Carson Palmer seems like he's so up-down, and like you just talked about, how volatile their wide receiver situation is. Granted, they have a pretty good defense, and good defenses will always keep you in a game, but I just feel like they're smoke and mirrors. They're fake.
Well, that wraps up the news portion of the show. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about some deep sleepers that you may not know about going into your drafts. We'll look at some handcuff players, and then we have the King's Decree. You're listening to the Fantasy Nerds on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. The Fantasy Nerd Show is sponsored by the Fan Up Network. They've developed the ultimate fantasy football app. It's a one-stop shop for everything you need. You can track teams and scores across multiple platforms, get latest injury and player news, and access to expert advice. See the hot trends with waiver pickups and drops. It has everything you need to manage all your fantasy football teams. Android users can get the app in the Play Store, and an iPhone version is now available in the App Store. Go to fanupnetwork.com to learn more, and follow them on Twitter at fanupnetwork. Welcome back to the Fantasy Nerds. I'm here with my brother, Joel Jarvie, and we're going to talk about handcuffs. Now, handcuffs is an interesting thing. It's you're drafting a really good player, and then you're handcuffing him with his backup player. Now, it's a really we were looking into it, and there's really only handcuffs for running backs.
Yeah, I think so.
There's really no other position that you would handcuff.
Yeah. Let me ask you something, Jason. In draft, I've done this before, and is there a better feeling than stealing somebody's handcuff in draft and just looking them in the eye as you put that backup's name up there and just go, I can't wait for your guy to get injured.
I know that happens, and I think
it feels so good.
No, it is great. Not everybody should be handcuffed. I mean, if you're drafting Amir Abdullah, I'm not really going to draft Theo Riddick or Zach Zinner to be the handcuffed of it. So,
or that Washington kid, hey,
right,
touchdown in every preseason game, right? Almost.
I do like him. I'm not going to lie, but I'm gonna try and hold myself off until maybe the last round in our draft. But I mean, you explained it really well of how handcuffs will actually work.
So handcuffs really are guys that, when it comes down to it, when the injury happens, your team will not be able to sustain their loss. But it's also nuanced in the fact that the guy behind him that's going to come in and replace him is going to give you similar, if not slightly less production-wise. So that's why when we talked about this, we said quarterbacks, not really much, right? A high drafted, you're not going to draft Cam Newton and then go, I don't even know who the backup is in Carolina.
It might be Jimmy Clausen.
So you're not going to get Jimmy Clausen because at the end of the day, you're going to go out and you're going to find another starter. So that's not really a true handcuff. You're not going to go handcuff wide receivers either. What you will handcuff, though, and I think we both agree on this, is running backs.
Yeah, and we went over all the running backs and the depth charts in the league, and we came up with 8 running back situations that really deserve to be handcuffs, because a lot of them, the backup running backs, it's just not going to be worth it. So we have the 8 situations where you really should be handcuffing your running back, and you got to start out with Le'Veon Bell and D'Angelo Williams. I mean, Le'Veon Bell just purely because he's going to be out for the first 3 games, and we saw what D'Angelo Williams was able to do last year when he was in there for Bell. So I think that's probably the top one, because Williams probably produced just as well as Le'Veon Bell would have done.
Yeah, it's not, and that's not an easy thing to do, but I think it's a great offense for D'Angelo Williams, just like it's a great offense for Le'Veon Bell. So if you did that last year, you probably reaped the rewards of having just solid running back play every week of the year.
Yeah, and I know in the league that we did with your son, he drafted Le'Veon Bell in the first round, and then you traded him D'Angelo Williams in the first week.
Yeah, I took D'Angelo Williams late, and it was his first season playing fantasy, and I said, I will trade you D'Angelo Williams. We made a trade. I took a pick from him. He took D'Angelo Williams from me. And in the end, it ended up helping him have a really nice season. And I don't regret anything. But I told him, hey, that's your pass, kid. Nothing else. You got to earn everything else from here on out, man. I'm not going to hold your hand through your fantasy life.
You better. I'm going to hold you to that. The next guy on the list, pretty obvious as well. Adrian Peterson with his backup is Jerick McKinnon. And I think even Jerick McKinnon is going to have some value this year, even as more than just a handcuff. So if you're one of those players who wants to go out and snipe a handcuff, Jerick McKinnon might actually give you a week here or there, because they've said that they want to get him involved, and they involved him later in the year last year. So I think that's a really good handcuff to have.
Yeah, ask AP owners these last couple years when he has had injuries, how much it hurts when you don't have the handcuff for that guy.
Yeah, so the next, we couldn't really decide between the number 3, so we kind of had to have a tie for the number 3 position for handcuffs. And that's the Dallas Cowboys with Ezekiel Elliott and Alfred Morris, and the Green Bay Packers with Eddie Lacy and James Starks.
Again, not a ton. I mean, you'd like to think that Ezekiel Elliott is going to be head and shoulders better than Alfred Morris. So I think in that situation, it's about having the guy that will then reap the rewards of the line that Zeke's going to run behind.
And I think with draft Alfred Morris and Ezekiel Elliott, I think you're also doing that because you're drafting Elliott so high, and he's likely going to go in the first round. So you're just getting that insurance just in case there's a hamstring injury, or God forbid he blows out his ACL. Then at least you're not completely losing your first round pick.
Yeah, and I think when it comes down to Lacey and Starks, I think you're talking more about a closer talent pool. Like Starks has shown that he can step in and perform when Lacey gets hurt, so that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, and it might even be split at times. If Lacey backslides at all, I don't think Mike McCarthy will have any hesitation to try out James Starks, because they want to win. They have a team that's built to win with Aaron Rodgers, with Jordy Nelson healthy now. They're going to go with whoever is really getting the job done. Mm-hmm. So moving on to number 5. The breakout running back last year, Devontae Freeman, wasn't the starter last year. It was his backup, Tevin Coleman. And I think it's a similar situation this year, is where you should probably handcuff both of these guys, because the drop off isn't going to be that much.
No, Freeman and Coleman, both very talented young running backs, and I think it only makes sense to insure yourself against losses.
And the drop off probably wouldn't be too big between the two. I think Freeman really was the benefactor of like 3 really good weeks last year.
Exceptional weeks.
He had 3 touchdowns in those games.
Sick.
So that's another handcuff. Going on down the line, David Johnson and Chris Johnson in Arizona. I'm still not sold on David Johnson. So I think you can do this handcuff on a couple levels. You can do it on the level that David Johnson is going so high, so you're just drafting his backup, but you're also drafting it just in case David Johnson becomes, I don't know, Zach Stacy.
Ugh. Yeah, let's hope not. Everyone is so high on David Johnson, and again, the Cardinals just seem like smoke and mirrors, and I think that could be a value pick. I feel like the David Johnson, Chris Johnson, you're going to see less of one team drafting that, and you're going to see 2 guys drafting them separately, and casting their lot with their guy.
Yeah, and I think Chris Johnson, if he had to be the starter, he was reinvigorated last year until he got hurt. So I think if he has a reduced role, or maybe midway through the season he has to come in and be the starter, that would just help his value. Going on to number 7, it's Jamal Charles and Spencer Ware. And you could throw in Sharkandrick West, but I think Ware would be the true insurance there. And I think that's purely in case Jamal Charles gets hurt.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's safe right now based on just what the news that's coming out of Kansas City and how they're going to be easing Jamal back into the, regular lineup and regular workload. So take advantage of that. Week 1 is so important, you guys. 1-0 is so important when you start. And if Spencer Ware is the guy that can get you there, don't be afraid to take him.
Yeah, and the last pair on this list is Jeremy Langford and Kadeem Carey on the Chicago Bears. Langford, at the beginning of the preseason, it was really a big question mark if he was even going to be the starter, and he's definitely proven that there's a reason that they let go of Forte, and it's because they really like Jeremy Langford. But I think he's going to be on a tight leash. I know John Fox, when he was in Denver, he's not married to one running back. So I think it'll probably be a little bit of a committee with Langford getting the bulk of the carries. But Kadeem Carey, I think, based on what he would do if he was the starter, that's why you would draft him as a handcuff.
I think if you look at Langford's career, all the guy does is win. He may not be the fastest, he may not be the strongest, but the guy just comes in and he just balls so hard. I love Jeremy Langford, and you know why. So I wouldn't be afraid to draft him.
So you may be asking, why don't we list, every handcuff? Why don't we say, Melvin Gordon and Danny Woodhead? And that's really because those are 2 guys that are going to be drafted in similar positions. The way you should draft handcuffs is you're drafting one high player, and then you're able to get this guy maybe in the middle part of the draft. Woodhead and Gordon, even you look at the Tennessee Titans situation with DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry. Both of those guys are going to be drafted high. So it doesn't really make sense to handcuff those guys, because unless one of those guys gets injured, you're just going to have two of the same player on your team.
Yeah, at that point, you're better off. We talked about this. At that point in the draft where you're going to have to take some of these guys, you're better off diversifying and getting different running backs, getting different teams, spreading the wealth around.
Moving on, we're going to talk about deep sleepers real quick. And I want to give a quarterback, a running back, and a wide receiver. I think quarterback, we already kind of talked about him. You really like Dak Prescott. And I definitely see the potential with what else is around him. I think he's a really deep sleeper in drafts. And I know you said that you would probably have him on your radar towards the end of the draft. Other quarterbacks to maybe draft, I don't know.
I don't know that you can you even consider Dak Prescott a deep sleeper anymore?
I don't know. It's kind of a question mark. He could be just a regular sleeper. He's definitely not so highly rated that he should be in the top 15 or top 20 of quarterbacks. But I think the cards are in his favor.
So I'm going to throw out a name for my deep sleeper, and it's probably going to be funny, but, I think I've said it before. I think I'm going to keep an eye on RG3. I think he's poised to make a really nice comeback. It was poison in Washington for him those last couple years. It was poison in Washington ever since he got injured. And that guy was never going to succeed there. He comes to Cleveland. He gets a fresh start. We were talking about all those sneaky weapons that he's got around him. He's my pick for a deep sleeper.
I like it. Going on to running backs, I like out of Houston, Tyler Ervin. He's not a handcuff for Lamar Miller, but what he's shown in preseason is that he's a very fast running back, and he's definitely put himself above Alfred Blue, who's been, he couldn't beat out Aaron Foster. He couldn't win the starting job last year when Foster went down. So I like what I see from Tyler Ervin, and he may have some more value in the right leagues. In a PPR league, I think he could be a pass catching threat. And if you get yards for kick returning, he's going to be an option for the Houston Texans.
What do you think about James White? You feel like he's a sleeper?
I do think he's a sleeper. I'm not sure if you can really categorize him a sleeper. I know people aren't as high on him as maybe I am, because I think that running back situation in New England is just up for grabs. LeGarrette Blount, it would definitely be the main rusher, but they like to pass. And I think James White is going to be the biggest benefactor of that.
Interesting.
So would James White be your deep sleeper at running back?
Yeah, I think if you can consider him a sleeper, just like any New England Patriot running back, know that Bill Belichick hates you as a fantasy player and doesn't want to see you succeed. But I like James White. I like, for the reasons you said, he's a good receiver. I feel like Blunt is good in spurts and can be solid, but I mean, if the guy was that good, he wouldn't be bouncing around the league and be on so many teams. So let's keep an eye on James White.
I think, even if you could probably throw out a couple. You can also throw out Tyler Gaffney, who's another running back in the Patriots. He did get banged up in their last preseason game, but he's a name to remember. I wouldn't draft him, and he should go undrafted, but he's a name that you should remember when the Patriots are going through all their running backs, and then maybe they decide on Gaffney, but they might decide on White. But who knows? Nobody knows. Bill Belichick probably doesn't even know himself. So going to wide receiver, I'm actually going to stick with the Patriots. I like Chris Hogan, and they like their tiny, scrappy wide receivers, and I think that perfectly describes Chris Hogan. There really isn't. I don't think they're sure who's going to get the ball after Rob Gronkowski and Julian Edelman. Those are the top two targets. Their wide receiver situation has really just been up in the air. Aaron Dobson hasn't really emerged as that number two guy. Danny Amendola is always hurt. It would go to Deion Lewis if he was healthy. But I think Chris Hogan, he's developed a relationship with Tom Brady, and I think he could be a very sneaky player to get late in drafts.
Okay, my deep sleeper for wide receiver, guys, Tyler Boyd from the Cincinnati Bengals.
Like that pick.
Second round pick. Nice maybe replacement for Mohamed Sanu. The Bengals lost, Mohamed Sanu and Marvin Jones Jr. So there's definitely balls to go around in Cincinnati. Keep an eye on Tyler Boyd.
And with Tyler Eifert out for the first 4 to 6 weeks, I think that's a really great pick. I definitely could see him doing some things this year.
Yes.
That about wraps up the show, but we can't finish without giving you my King's Decree. Now, this will be my last King's Decree for the show. With week 1 starting, we're going to dive more into projections, and maybe we'll come up with something else with like a start-sit-'em type thing. But my final King's Decree is that Terrell Pryor, Cleveland Browns wide receiver, is going to be a top 30 wide receiver this year.
Woo.
With Josh Gordon out for the first 4 weeks, and with the Browns, they've already come out and they said that they like what Pryor can do. He's fast, and it's a much different situation from when he was in Oakland. He has the same quarterback the same coach with Hugh Jackson. When he was in Oakland, he wasn't really committed to making the transition, but it's a completely different situation now that he's really committed, and you've seen him catch long touchdowns in the preseason, and they're going to have to throw the ball to somebody. Josh Gordon's out the first 4 weeks, and you can only throw it so many times to Gary Barnidge. So I think that's my basis for Terrell Pryor being a top 30 wide receiver this year.
So we're going to go back at the end of this, and we're going to fact check all these King's Decrees at the end of the season.
Yep.
I can't wait for that episode. That's going to be a great episode.
That'll be interesting to see. We may even find some out earlier. Last week's projection was, I think, that I'd lose one of my starters in the first 4 weeks, I think. But we'll see. But that does it for the King's Decree. That wraps up this episode of the Fantasy Nerds, episode number 30. Big milestone. And we'll be back.
Don't wait, 30? Really? This is 30?
It is 30.
Don't you have something coming up that's 32?
I do. It's my 30th birthday in a couple weeks.
Well, there you go. Isn't that fitting?
It is fitting. So when we come back next week, it'll be on the eve. Actually, no, will it be already? We'll have our first game.
Yeah, Thursday night will be in the books.
Thursday night, game 1 will already be in the books, and we'll break down the rest of the week 1 matchups. But until then, later, nerds.
Peace.